In 1997, a father and his teenage son vanished without a trace. Their SUV was found here, parked at the bridge, door wide open, belongings scattered. But no bodies were ever recovered. For over 2 decades, the case has haunted investigators and torn a family apart. Now new evidence has surfaced. Evidence that may finally reveal what happened on that October night. If you're drawn to stories of long unsolved disappearances and the secrets buried in small towns, don't forget to subscribe. The night air along County Road 9 was colder than usual for October. A thin mist curled up from the river, shrouding the narrow 2-lane bridge that spanned it. At 2:14 a.m., a truck driver spotted an SUV idling there, hazard lights flashing in the dark. He slowed, uneasy. The vehicle was empty. Driver's door swung wide, interior light glowing faintly. A child's backpack sat on the back seat. A thermos of coffee rested in the cup holder, still warm when the responding deputy arrived half an hour later. But of the driver, 42-year-old Mark Delaney, and his 14-year-old son, Ethan, there was no sign. The sheriff's office searched the river with dogs and divers. They combed the surrounding woods, posted flyers, interviewed truckers and motel clerks. Nothing. Days stretched into weeks. Rumors spread like wildfire. Suicide pact. Drug deal gone wrong. A staged disappearance. A stranger lurking in the trees. But the river gave up no bodies, and the Delaneys were never seen again. The bridge looked smaller now. 23 years later, the cracked asphalt had faded to a pale gray. The guardrails rusted in places where water dripped constantly. Detective Claire Norris stood at the edge, hands stuffed in her coat pockets, as the autumn sun burned away the morning fog. She hadn't been here in years, not since she was a rookie patrol officer helping direct traffic the morning after the Delaneys vanished. She remembered the flashing lights, the swarm of deputies, the white-faced sheriff standing by the SUV. She remembered the way people whispered. Now she was back, not as a rookie, but as the county's lead investigator for cold cases. The sheriff's office had reopened the Delaney file last month after a construction crew digging along the river uncovered something buried deep in the silt, a human femur wrapped in decayed denim fabric. Forensics confirmed it belonged to a male, early 40s, Mark Delaney. But there was no trace of Ethan. Claire turned her gaze downriver. The water looked calm today, but she knew its currents were deceptive. Winding underground channels, sudden drop-offs. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that if Mark's body had surfaced, Ethan's should have too. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen. A message from her partner, Detective Luis Vega. "Meet you at the morgue. 9:30. They're ready." Claire pocketed the phone and took one last look at the bridge. A bird wheeled overhead, its cry sharp in the stillness. She exhaled, turned, and walked back to her car. At the county morgue, the air was cool and faintly chemical. Dr. Shapiro, the medical examiner, stood at a steel table, a set of bones carefully arranged before her. She looked up as Claire and Vega entered. "You've seen the report?" Shapiro asked. "Highlights," Claire said. "Male, early 40s. Cause of death?" Shapiro lifted one of the ribs with gloved hands. "That's where it gets interesting. See this?" She pointed to a jagged notch in the bone. "Knife wound, clean, deliberate. Not an accident, not an animal. Someone stabbed him, likely through the chest." Claire exchanged a glance with Vega. "So not a drowning. Not unless he drowned after someone stuck a knife in his heart," Shapiro said flatly. She set the rib back down with care. "Time frame matches. I'd estimate death around 97. This is your missing father." Vega crossed his arms. "And the boy?" Shapiro shook her head. "No remains found." Yet Claire's stomach tightened. For 23 years, people had speculated that Mark drove the SUV onto the bridge, got out, and jumped, taking Ethan with him. But if he'd been stabbed, that changed everything. Someone wanted him dead, she said quietly. And someone, Vega added, might still be walking free. The Delaney file was thick. Claire spent the afternoon at her desk, sifting through brittle reports and old photographs. Mark had been a dentist in the nearby town of Ridgetop, respected, no criminal record. His wife Ellen had died of cancer 2 years before the disappearance. Neighbors described him as devoted to Ethan, coached Little League, volunteered at school events. The night they vanished, Mark had told his sister they were driving to a cabin near the river for a father-son weekend. He never said which cabin. The SUV was found at 2:14 a.m. The driver's door open, headlights on, Ethan's backpack still inside. Claire studied the photos again. Something about them unsettled her. The way the thermos was placed neatly in the cup holder, the keys dangling from the ignition. It felt staged, almost deliberate. She turned to Vega. What if they didn't disappear together? What if someone separated them? Vega leaned back in his chair. So the father ends up dead by the river. And the son? Claire tapped the photograph of the backpack. The son is taken. Alive. That evening, Claire drove out to the Delaney home, a modest 2-story on the edge of town, now owned by another family. She sat across the street in her car, staring at the house. Kids' bikes leaned against the porch. Curtains glowed with warm lamplight. She imagined Ethan at 14, lanky, awkward, probably trying to act older than he was. What had he seen that night? What had happened to him? Her phone rang. Unknown number. Detective Norris, she answered. A man's voice, low and gravelly. You're looking for the boy. Claire froze. Who is this? A pause. Then, you won't find him in the river. The line went dead. Claire sat motionless, phone still to her ear, the empty dial tone buzzing. Her pulse hammered in her throat. Someone knew she'd reopened the case. Someone wanted her to know Ethan was still out there, alive. Or at least, he had been. The night after the anonymous call, Claire barely slept. She lay awake in her apartment, city lights bleeding through the blinds, her mind replaying the voice on the phone. Gravelly, deliberate. Not rushed, not panicked. A man who wanted to be heard. You're looking for the boy. You won't find him in the river. She repeated the words silently, over and over, until they felt etched into her skull. If it was a prank, it was cruel. If it wasn't, then someone had been holding back for more than 2 decades. By morning, she'd resolved 2 things. She wouldn't tell the press. Not yet. And she needed to get the phone records pulled before whoever called decided to disappear again. Vega met her at the precinct just after 8. He was carrying his usual oversized thermos and a folder tucked under his arm. You look like hell, he said, sliding into the chair opposite her desk. Didn't sleep, Claire replied. She told him about the call, word for word. Vega's brow furrowed. You record it? Claire shook her head. Didn't have time. I've already put in a request with the phone company. They'll pull logs from last night. Vega sipped his coffee. Whoever it was knew the right thing to say. Enough to hook you. It wasn't random, Claire said. He knew we reopened the case, and he knew I was on it. Vega tapped the folder against the desk, thinking, let's assume he's legit. That means someone kept quiet for 23 years. Why talk now? Claire didn't answer. She didn't know. Their first stop that morning was the county records office. Vega had pulled the old call logs from October 1997, the deluge of tips and sightings that always came after a disappearance hit the news. The pages were yellowing, edges curled, but the notes were still legible. October 15th, 1997, female caller, withheld name. Claim saw SUV near bridge at midnight, report forwarded. October 16th, 1997. Anonymous male, refused to ID. Stated, don't bother with the river. Hung up, number untraceable. Claire's eyes narrowed. Same phrasing. Vega leaned closer. Don't bother with the river. Now, 23 years later, you won't find him in the river, Claire said, her voice low. They both sat in silence for a moment. Same man? Vega asked. Claire nodded slowly. Feels like it. Which means he's been watching this case the whole time. By noon they were in Ridgetop, the small town where the Delaney's had lived. Main Street hadn't changed much since the 90s. Brick storefronts, faded awnings, the same diner with the neon coffee cup sign flickering. Claire parked outside the library, where she'd arranged to meet a woman named Karen Willis. Karen had been Ethan's classmate in 1997. She was 37 now, a school counselor, but Claire wanted to hear what she remembered about the boy everyone had once whispered about. Karen met them in the children's section, her hair pulled into a tight bun, expression cautious. I haven't thought about Ethan in years, she admitted after introductions. But back then, everyone was obsessed. Kids were scared. Parents doubled curfews. What was he like? Claire asked. Karen smiled faintly. Quiet. He loved baseball cards, I remember that. He'd trade during lunch. After his mom died, he got even quieter. You could tell his dad was trying hard, though. Mark would show up to school events, smiling, making sure Ethan wasn't left out. Any trouble at home? Vega asked. Karen shook her head. If anything, Ethan clung to his dad. He once told me, it's just me and him now, like it was their secret world. She paused. But the week before they disappeared, he was different, restless. Distracted, Claire leaned in. Different how? Karen frowned, thinking. He asked me if I ever felt like someone was following me. I laughed, thought he was joking. But he wasn't smiling. After leaving the library, Claire and Vega drove to the sheriff's office archives to pull the original interviews. Sure enough, Ethan's teachers had mentioned a similar thing. The boy seemed on edge, checking the windows often, jumping at sudden noises. Claire closed the file slowly. So maybe this wasn't random. Someone was watching them, Vega said. Maybe someone close, Claire added. That evening, Claire stopped at Ellen Delaney's grave on the edge of town. The headstone was simple. Ellen Marie Delaney, 1958 to 1995. Beloved wife and mother. Fresh flowers lay at the base, their stems still green. Claire crouched down, touched a petal. Someone had been here recently. She rose and looked around. The cemetery was empty, but she felt eyes on her. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown number again. She answered. This is Detective Norris. Silence on the line, just breathing. Then, in that same gravelly voice, You're close. Too close. The line went dead. Claire's hand tightened around the phone. The evening air suddenly felt colder, the shadows heavier. For the first time since reopening the case, she felt not like an investigator, but like prey. The next morning, Claire sat in the precinct's evidence room with the Delaney file spread across the table. Paper, not digital. Thick, frayed manila folders filled with handwritten notes, Polaroids, and typed reports that smelled faintly of dust. Vega came in balancing 2 coffees and a breakfast burrito in his other hand. He dropped 1 cup beside her. You're digging early, he said, unwrapping the burrito. Couldn't sleep, Claire replied. You ever sleep? She ignored the jab, sliding a photograph toward him. It showed Mark Delaney in front of his dental office, smiling, arm around Ethan. A man who looked steady, ordinary, but people rarely vanish without shadows in their lives. Mark had a brother, Claire said. Younger by 3 years. Name's Peter Delaney. Last known address was Houston. He was interviewed back in '97. Said he hadn't seen Mark in years. But there's tension noted. Disagreements about their father's estate, Vega chewed thoughtfully. Money. Always a good motive. Claire flipped open another file. Then there's the business partner, Dr. Harold Fenwick. Co-owned the dental practice. Apparently, Fenwick was under investigation for insurance fraud back then. Mark had threatened to report him, Better motive, Vega said. Guy could have lost his license. And then there's this. Claire held up a slip of paper, brittle from age. Anonymous letter sent a week after the disappearance, postmarked from Dallas. Says, check closer to home. The boy isn't lost, he's kept. No handwriting match, no follow-up. Vega frowned. They really dropped the ball on this. It was the 90s, Claire said. No DNA databases, no cell tower pings, and no one wanted to believe something like this could happen in Ridgetop. She closed the file. Let's start with Fenwick. He's still practicing. 2 towns over. Dr. Harold Fenwick's office was a single-story building with a peeling white sign. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and fluoride. The receptionist, a brisk woman with horn-rimmed glasses, eyed their badges nervously before showing them into Fenwick's office. Fenwick himself was in his late 60s now, hair thin and white, his frame still solid. He adjusted his glasses as they introduced themselves. I figured this might come back one day, he said, leaning back in his chair. Mark's case. The bridge. You were his partner, Claire said. Yes, we built that practice together. He was a good man, better dentist than me, if I'm being honest. Patients loved him. Fenwick sighed. I wish I knew what happened. Claire opened her notebook. The file mentions tension. You were being investigated for billing irregularities. His eyes flickered. That was a long time ago, and it was a misunderstanding. I was cleared. Mark was going to report you, Vega said evenly. Fenwick's jaw tightened. He threatened to, but we worked it out. Look, I didn't kill my partner. I respected him. And Ethan, Fenwick's voice faltered. I like that boy. I used to sneak him extra toothbrush kits. Where were you the night they disappeared? Claire asked. Fenwick spread his hands. Home. My wife was alive then. She can vouch. Of course, she's passed on now. You can check my staff at the time. They'll confirm. Claire studied him. His voice had a practiced steadiness, but his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of unease. We'll be in touch, she said, rising. Back in the car, Vega drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. He's hiding something. Not necessarily murder, Claire said, but something. Vega started the engine. Next stop, Peter Delaney? Claire nodded. Houston was 3 hours south, traffic heavy as they reached the outskirts. Peter Delaney's listed address was a small house on a cul-de-sac. A man in his late 50s opened the door, balding, dressed in a threadbare t-shirt. Detectives, he said, eyeing their badges. This about Mark? Mind if we come in? Claire asked. Inside, the house smelled of stale beer and dust. Newspapers were stacked in corners, the furniture sagging. Peter gestured them to sit, but didn't offer drinks. I haven't thought about my brother in years, he said. Not since all that. All what? Vega asked. Peter rubbed his jaw. The disappearance. The cops hounding me. The town whispering. You know what it's like being the relative of someone who vanishes? You're the villain by default. Your relationship with Mark, Claire pressed. The file says you argued over your father's estate. Peter snorted. We argued about everything. He was the golden boy, dentist, perfect wife, perfect kid. I got the leftovers. But kill him? Number. He was my brother. Claire studied him. His bitterness was raw, decades old, but it felt real. Do you know anyone who might have wanted to hurt him? She asked. Peter was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Mark wasn't as perfect as people thought. He had secrets, things he didn't want anyone to know. What kind of secrets? Claire asked. Peter leaned forward, voice dropping. Ask around about his patients. Some of those women weren't just there for dental cleanings. Claire's stomach tightened. Affairs? Peter shrugged. I don't know, but I heard things. And when Ellen got sick, it got worse. Driving back north, Vega broke the silence first. So maybe Mark wasn't as saintly as advertised. Which gives us a whole new list of suspects, Claire muttered. Affairs, Jealous husbands, angry patients. Vega glanced at her. Or maybe his brother's just bitter and wants to smear him. Claire looked out the window at the blur of highway lights. Either way, it means we dig deeper. That night, Claire returned home late. She tossed her coat over a chair, poured a glass of water, and sat by the window. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her chest tightened as she answered. "You talked to his brother," the gravelly voice said. Claire's throat went dry. "Who is this?" "You're chasing ghosts. You need to look closer to the bridge." The line went dead. Claire lowered the phone slowly. Outside her window, across the street, a dark sedan idled under the lamplight. Its headlights flicked on, then it drove away. Claire's reflection in the glass looked pale, haunted. She realized then that the case wasn't just about the past anymore. Someone was pulling her into the present. The rain came down in thin, cold sheets the next morning, turning the courthouse parking lot into a slick mirror. Claire leaned against the car while Vega fumbled with the umbrella. "Tell me again why we're digging through 25-year-old appointment logs?" he asked. "Because Mark's brother said he had secrets," Claire replied, zipping her coat higher. "If there's any truth to that, it would be in his patient files." The clerk at the courthouse basement led them to a locked records room. Boxes lined the shelves, labeled in faded marker, Delaney Dental, 1990 to 1997. Claire pulled on gloves and slid one box onto the table. Inside were neat stacks of appointment cards, billing ledgers, and insurance forms. For hours, they sifted. Patterns began to emerge. Certain patients who returned far more often than necessary, sometimes billed for questionable procedures. A few were women in their 20s with addresses that didn't match their insurance. Claire tapped one name with her pen. Melanie Carter. 6 visits in 3 months. Cash payments. Vega leaned closer. "Anything else?" She flipped through the notes. In the margin of one, in Mark's handwriting, "After hours." Vega raised his brows. "Sounds like more than a cleaning." They flagged 4 similar names and packed the boxes back up. "Next step," Claire said. "We tracked down these women." The first, Melanie Carter, lived 2 counties away. She was 41 now, a nurse at a rehabilitation clinic. She met them on her lunch break, seated stiffly at a picnic table under a tree. "I was young back then," she said when asked about Mark. 19. Scared. "My mom scraped money to send me to him because I hated my smile." "Did you know him outside the office?" Claire asked. Melanie hesitated, then nodded faintly. "He called me after an appointment. Said he could help me with more than just my teeth. Took me out for coffee. He was kind, charming. I'd just gotten out of a bad relationship." "I thought it was harmless, was it?" Vega asked. Her eyes dropped. "No, we started seeing each other. I thought it was real. Then one day he stopped answering my calls. I found out later his wife's health had worsened. I never heard from him again." Claire kept her voice neutral. "Did anyone know about your relationship?" Melanie shook her head. "Only my roommate. I didn't tell anyone else. I was embarrassed." "Do you remember if anyone seemed to be watching you, following you?" Claire pressed. Melanie frowned, thinking. "Actually, yes. Once, a man in a truck outside my apartment. He just sat there staring. When I went back inside, he drove away." "Can you describe him?" She shook her head. It was dark, but I remember the truck. Old green, with rust on the fender. The second woman, Caroline Hughes, agreed to meet at a cafe. She was older, composed, her hair streaked with gray. "Mark was lonely," she said flatly. "His wife was dying. I was divorced. We kept each other company. Did it end badly?" Claire asked. Caroline stirred her coffee slowly. "He broke it off. Said he wanted to focus on Ethan. I respected that. But there was one night," she hesitated, "we met at a diner out by the river. He was nervous, kept looking at the window. Said someone had followed him there. He wouldn't tell me who. Just that they were angry. Vega leaned forward. What kind of angry? The kind that makes you think you shouldn't go home alone, Caroline said. By the time they returned to the precinct, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets damp and gleaming. Claire spread their notes on the desk. 2 women confirm affairs. Both mention being watched. This isn't coincidence. Vega rubbed his temples. So someone finds out about Mark's affairs. Could be a jealous husband, could be one of the women, could be anyone in town. Gossip chain. Claire's phone buzzed. A new message from an unknown number. Stop digging or you'll end up where he did. Attached was a photo. Claire's apartment building taken from across the street, her window circled in red. Her chest tightened. She looked up at Vega. It's not just ghosts from the past anymore. Someone's here. Watching. That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment, lights dimmed. Every creak of the building made her tense. She replayed the women's words, the way Mark had been looking over his shoulder in those final weeks. She understood it now. The bridge wasn't just a place they'd ended up. It was where someone had planned to make them vanish. The town of Ridgetop looked the same on the surface. Tidy storefronts, the courthouse clock chiming on the hour, the diner buzzing with farmers and mechanics over coffee. But when word spread that detectives were asking about Mark Delaney again, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations hushed as Claire and Vega walked by. Heads turned, whispers trailed behind them like smoke. Small towns never forget, Vega muttered as they pushed open the door to the diner. The bell jingled overhead, and a dozen eyes flicked their way. They slid into a booth by the window. A waitress approached, middle-aged, with tired eyes and a name tag that read, Joyce. You're the detectives, she said flatly, pen hovering over her order pad. That obvious? Claire asked. Joyce gave a humorless smile. Only thing folks are talking about this week. Coffee? Please, Vega said. As she poured, Claire studied her face. You worked here long? 30 years. So you remember Mark Delaney? Joyce's eyes flickered. Everyone remembers. Him and that boy. She lowered her voice. Folks thought he was a saint, but saints don't sneak into diners after midnight with women who aren't their wives. Claire leaned in. You saw him? Joyce shrugged. Saw plenty. He'd meet that Carter girl sometimes. The Hughes woman too. Thought they were being discreet. But this town's small. Nothing stays secret. Did anyone seem angry about it? Vega asked. Joyce's gaze slid toward a man at the counter, broad-shouldered, in greasy coveralls. He ate with his head down, but Claire could see the tension in his posture. Caroline Hughes's ex-husband, Joyce whispered. Name's Donnie. Back then he used to come in here, red in the face, saying he'd kill Mark if he ever caught him with his wife. Everyone thought it was bluster. Claire exchanged a glance with Vega. Maybe it wasn't. They waited until Donnie left, then followed him out into the parking lot. His truck was parked under a flickering streetlight. Old green. Rust on the fender. Claire's pulse quickened. Detective Norris? Vega murmured. Looks like your stalker drives local. They approached slowly. Donnie was climbing into the cab when Vega flashed his badge. Mr. Hughes, got a minute? Donnie froze, hand on the door handle. His eyes narrowed. This about Delaney? Yes, Claire said evenly. We'd like to ask a few questions. His jaw worked as if grinding gravel. Then he slammed the truck door shut and faced them squarely. Ask. Did you know about your wife's involvement with Mark? His lips twisted. Everyone knew. She didn't hide it well. Whole damn town knew. Did you confront him? Donnie's fists clenched. Once, outside this diner. Told him if he didn't back off, I'd put him in the ground. And when he disappeared a week later? Vega asked. Donnie's eyes darkened. You think I did it? Did you? Claire pressed. For a moment, the parking lot seemed to hold its breath. Rain pattered on the asphalt, the diner's neon humming faintly. Then Donnie shook his head, slow and deliberate. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But when he vanished, I was at work. Overnight shift at the mill. Plenty of witnesses. Convenient alibi, Vega muttered. Convenient or not, it's the truth, Donnie snapped. And if you think I've been waiting 23 years to toy with detectives, you're wrong. I don't care where he ended up. He got what was coming. He climbed into the truck, started the engine. But I'll tell you this, he said through the open window. If someone did kill him, it wasn't over money. It was over shame. Mark made enemies. He smiled while he was taking from people. Folks don't forget that the truck rumbled away, taillights fading into the wet night. Claire stood still, staring at the rusted fender. Think he's our caller? Vega asked. Claire shook her head slowly. No. Donnie's anger burns hot. The voice on the phone. That was colder. Calculated. The next day, Claire pulled the old tip line logs again, focusing on handwriting from mailed notes. The anonymous letter. Check closer to home. The boy isn't lost. He's kept. The strokes were shaky but deliberate. Someone trying to disguise their natural hand. Vega leaned over her shoulder. Closer to home? Meaning what? That Ethan wasn't dead? Claire's eyes lingered on the word kept. Kept means alive, she said softly. They tracked another rumor, that Mark Delaney had been treating a woman named Sandra Lake, whose husband had a reputation for violence. Sandra now lived in a trailer on the edge of town. She opened the door cautiously, thin and pale, chain smoking. Mark Delaney, Claire began. Do you remember him? Sandra's eyes darted nervously. Course I do. He fixed my teeth. Wouldn't take payment sometimes. Said I could settle later. Did your husband know? Her lips trembled. He thought I was seeing Mark. But I wasn't. Not like that. Still, he'd come home drunk, rage about it. Said he'd string Mark up. I begged him to stop. Where's your husband now? Vega asked. Prison, Sandra whispered. Got 20 years for assault in '98. He's still in there. Claire's gaze sharpened. So a year after Mark vanished, he nearly killed someone else. Sandra nodded, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands. If he did something to Mark, I wouldn't be surprised. That evening, Claire returned to her car in the precinct lot. A piece of paper was tucked under the wiper. Her stomach knotted as she pulled it free. Scrawled in uneven block letters. You're getting warmer. The boy is still closer than you think. No signature, no fingerprints, just rain-soaked ink. Claire's reflection stared back at her in the windshield. Pale, determined. For the first time since reopening the case, she felt the line between investigator and hunted blurring to nothing. The town library's microfilm machine hummed as Claire scrolled through the local paper archives from October 1997. The articles were predictable. Search for missing father and son intensifies. Community holds vigil. Sheriff urges calm. But a small column buried on page 9 caught her eye. Strange sightings reported along Ridgetop Bridge. The piece described multiple callers reporting a boy in pajamas, seen walking near the bridge the week after Mark and Ethan disappeared. Deputies dismissed it as rumor, pointing to the swollen river and saying the boy likely drowned. Claire leaned back in the chair, staring at the headline. A boy in pajamas. Ethan had been wearing pajamas that night. Blue flannel, according to the missing poster. Vega appeared at her side, balancing a paper cup of coffee. Find something? She tapped the article. People claim to see Ethan after the disappearance. They brushed it off. Vega squinted. Witnesses always see what they want to see after a case hits the news. Or, Claire countered, Ethan survived. Maybe he was seen because he was still here. Vega's eyes narrowed. Kept. The word echoed between them. They spent the afternoon visiting the few residents still alive who had called in those reports. Most had little to add beyond hazy memories. But one, an old man named Clyde Jenkins, was sharper than expected. He lived in a recliner in a cluttered farmhouse outside town, oxygen tank hissing softly. I remember it clear. Clyde rasped when Claire showed him Ethan's photo. Saw that boy walking the road by the bridge just after dusk. Thought it was strange, him out alone. I slowed my truck to ask if he needed help, but he bolted into the trees. Trees on which side? Claire asked. North side. Toward the quarry, Claire leaned forward. Did you tell deputies that back then? Course I did, Clyde wheezed. They laughed me off. Said grief makes folks see ghosts. He shook his head. But I know what I saw. That boy was alive. The quarry sat a mile from the bridge, a hollowed scar of rock and water. Weeds grew along the rusted fence, and half-buried "No Trespassing" signs sagged on bent poles. Claire and Vega parked by the gate. The place smelled of damp stone and iron. 23 years, Vega muttered. If Ethan was here, what would have kept him? Claire scanned the tree line. Cabins, outbuildings, the old caretaker's shack. They picked through brush until they found it. A shack of weathered boards, roof half collapsed, door hanging crooked. Inside, the air was stale with rot. Claire's flashlight cut across the floor. In the corner sat a child's shoe, small and blue. The rubber cracked with age. She crouched, gloved hand trembling as she lifted it. The sole was worn, but a faded sticker clung to the side. A baseball card image, yellowed. Vega's voice was low. Baseball cards! Karen Willis said he loved them. Claire's pulse hammered. This was his. The shoe went into evidence. Back at the lab, technicians confirmed it was a 1990s model. Children's size 6. They'd attempt DNA testing, but decades of exposure meant results would be uncertain. Claire stared at the evidence bag through the glass. She couldn't shake the image of Ethan running through the woods, barefoot, terrified. And if the shoe was here, what else had been? Albert Garrison's name barely appeared in official records. A few property tax slips, a caretaker's contract with the quarry company, and the citation about noise. But Claire knew ghosts often left their shadows in unexpected places. She and Vega began with the county archives. Birth records showed Albert had never married, never had children. He lived most of his life in Ridgetop, in the cabin by the quarry, until his death from a stroke in 2001. What about family? Vega asked, flipping through the thin folder. Claire shook her head. None listed. But she pointed at a note scrawled on the back of a payroll stub. A local church's name was written there, faint and almost illegible. The church sat on a hill overlooking town, its steeple black against the gray sky. They found the pastor, a gray-haired man named Reverend Blake, in his office surrounded by stacks of hymnals. Albert Garrison, Blake repeated, adjusting his glasses. Yes, I remember him. Came here sometimes. Sat in the back. Never spoke much. Did he ever bring anyone? Claire asked. The pastor's brow furrowed. Funny you should ask. Once, late 90s, he came with a boy. Skinny, maybe 8 or 9. The boy looked frightened, clung to Albert's sleeve the whole service. I thought he might be a relative, but Albert never introduced him. Claire's throat tightened. What happened after that? Never saw the boy again. They next sought out former quarry workers. One, a man named Henry Tate, remembered strange things. Albert was odd, Tate said, leaning on his porch railing. Didn't like visitors. Sometimes, when I drove past his cabin, I heard voices. Thought he had a radio on. But once, I saw a curtain twitch. Little face peeking out. Scared me stiff. Did you tell anyone? Vega asked. Tate spat into the dirt. Yeah, sheriff back then said I was imagining things. Said Albert was harmless. His eyes narrowed. Harmless, my ass. Back at the precinct, Claire spread the new testimony across the board. Photos of the cabin, The carving, "I want Mom." The child's shoe. And now, witness accounts of Ethan alive. "It fits," she murmured. "Albert kept him." "But why?" Vega pressed. "For ransom." "No demand was ever made." Claire shook her head. "Not ransom. Something else. Obsession." Control Vega frowned. "But Albert's dead." "So who's sending you these messages? Who's following us?" Claire's phone buzzed. Another message. A grainy photo of the church they'd visited that morning. "You ask the wrong shepherds. The lamb is still among us." Vega exhaled sharply. "Whoever this is, they know every move we make." Claire stared at the photo, unease rippling through her. "The lamb is still among us. Ethan." That night, Claire drove out to the quarry again. Alone. The moon hung low, casting silver across the water. She parked by the gate and walked into the trees, flashlight cutting a narrow path. The cabin loomed ahead, black against the night. She stepped inside, beams tracing the wall carvings again. A sound broke the silence. A floorboard creaked in the back room. Her breath froze. She raised the flashlight. Its beam caught the edge of a boot disappearing through a broken window. "Hey!" she shouted, rushing forward. But by the time she reached the window, whoever it was had vanished into the trees. On the floor lay something new. A baseball card, edges frayed, placed carefully in the dirt. She picked it up with trembling fingers. On the back, in childish scrawl, "Still here." She drove home on adrenaline, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Her apartment lights glared too bright when she walked in. She poured water and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the card. If Ethan was alive, had he left this? Or was someone else taunting her with the memory of a boy who never escaped the quarry? The baseball card sat in an evidence bag on Claire's desk, its colors dulled by time. The boy on the front, a rookie pitcher from 1996, stared out with a frozen smile, forever mid-throw. Claire couldn't stop staring back. If Ethan had left this card, it meant he'd been at the cabin recently. Alive, watching. But why taunt her? Why not come forward? "Maybe he doesn't want to be found," Vega said, dropping into the chair across from her. He looked tired, eyes shadowed. 23 years in the dark. Maybe the dark feels safer than the light. Claire rubbed her temples. Or maybe someone doesn't want him found. "Either way," Vega said, "we need to treat him as both victim and suspect, until we know for sure." They pulled Ethan's old school records, photographs, report cards. In the last photo before he vanished, Ethan stood awkwardly in front of a chalkboard, his hair unkempt, smile hesitant. Beside him, in looping cursive, someone had written, "Dream. Play for the Rangers." "Baseball," Claire whispered. It was his anchor. Vega tapped the evidence bag. And now it's his breadcrumb. They canvassed the area around the quarry. Several residents reported seeing a thin man wandering late at night, sometimes near the gas station, sometimes by the old railroad tracks. Always alone, always vanishing when approached. One cashier described him as young but with old eyes. Another swore his clothes looked decades out of date, flannel and worn jeans. Claire sketched a rough composite using Ethan's childhood photo as a base, aged forward. The resemblance was chilling. When she pinned it to the board, the room fell silent. Ethan Delaney, age 31. That night, Claire returned home to find her apartment door ajar. Her heart slammed. She drew her weapon, pushed the door open. The lights were off. She swept the rooms, bedroom, bathroom, living room, empty. But on the kitchen table lay another baseball card, face down. With shaking hands, she turned it over. On the back, in jagged handwriting, "You found me. But you're too late." The next morning, Claire showed Vega the card. "Either Ethan's alive and playing games," Vega said grimly, "or someone's trying damn hard to make us believe he is." "Why me?" Claire muttered. "Why not send these to the sheriff or the press?" Vega studied her, Because you're the one he wanted all along. Whoever this is, it's personal now. They dug deeper into Albert Garrison. A social worker's file from 1982 surfaced, long forgotten in county storage. It described complaints about Albert offering lodging to runaway kids. No charges were filed. Attached was a note. Child placed in temporary foster care. Male, approximately 9. Said Albert told him he could stay forever. Claire's skin prickled. Albert collected children, which means Ethan wasn't his first, Vega said. But he might have been his last, Claire whispered. That evening, Claire sat in her car outside the church, staring at the steeple silhouetted against the sinking sun. She thought of the pastor's words. Albert bringing a boy, once, who never returned. Her phone buzzed. Another message. A photo of her sitting in the car outside the church, taken from across the street. Text beneath, mothers go to church. Sons wait outside. Claire's breath caught. She scanned the street, but saw only shifting shadows and passing cars. For the first time, she wondered not just if Ethan was alive, but if he was the one watching her now. The storm rolled in fast, thunder growling over the hills. Sheets of rain blurred the courthouse steps as Claire and Vega dashed inside. The sheriff's office had called a briefing. New tips about sightings near the bridge. A deputy spread out photographs on the table. Grainy stills from a convenience store camera. In one frame, a man in a hood pulled snacks from the shelf. Thin frame, downcast eyes. The next frame caught his face half turned toward the lens. Claire's breath hitched. The jawline was sharper, the eyes sunken, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Ethan Delaney, grown, gaunt, alive. Timestamp? Vega asked, voice tight. 2 nights ago, the deputy replied. Claire's mind reeled. All this time. They hit the road immediately. The store clerk remembered the man clearly. He didn't say much, the clerk told them. Bought bread, jerky, matches, paid cash, kept glancing at the door like he was scared someone might come in. Which way did he go? Claire pressed. The clerk pointed east, toward the quarry road. That night, Claire and Vega parked in the shadows near the quarry, engine off, rain drumming on the roof. They waited in silence, eyes fixed on the tree line. Hours crawled past. Midnight, 1 a.m. Then, a flicker of movement, a figure slipping between trees. Hood drawn low, steps quick. Claire's pulse surged. That's him. They moved fast, flashlights cutting through wet underbrush. Police! Vega shouted. Stop! The figure bolted deeper into the woods. Branches snapped, mud splashed. Claire chased, lungs burning, heart hammering. The beam of her flashlight caught him briefly. Pale face, wide eyes, lips parted in terror. Ethan, she cried. He froze for a fraction of a second at the sound of his name. Then he was gone again, vanishing into the thicket. They searched for hours, but the woods swallowed him whole. By dawn, they staggered back to the car, soaked and exhausted. He heard you, Vega said. He knew his name. Claire leaned against the hood, rain dripping from her hair, and he ran. The next day, Claire received a package at the precinct. No return address. Inside was a small battered notebook. She flipped it open. Pages filled with uneven writing, some shaky, some nearly illegible. Day 4, hungry. Day 17, cold. Day 89. I want Mom. Day 201. Albert says I belong here. Day 732. I'm not Ethan anymore. Her throat closed. She kept turning pages. Day 3000. She never came. Day 4000. The dark is safer. Day 5000. Watching is better than being seen. At the back, a fresh entry. Day 8425. I saw you. You are too late. Claire's vision swam. Vega steadied her shoulder. It's him, she whispered. He's alive. And he's watching us. That night she woke to a sound at her window. She rose slowly, heart pounding. Through the glass, in the storm's flicker of lightning, she saw him. A man soaked, hood down, face pale, eyes hollow. Ethan. For a heartbeat, their gazes locked. His expression was unreadable. Sorrow, anger, something darker. Then he melted into the night, leaving only the rain-slick glass and Claire's reflection staring back. The journal lay open on Claire's desk, its pages weighed down with evidence tags. She traced the uneven handwriting with her fingertip, each entry a wound on paper. Day 5000. Watching is better than being seen. The words burned into her mind. Watching. The same thing Ethan had been doing to her. Why resurface now? Vega asked, pacing. He had decades to come forward. Instead, he hides, stalks, taunts. Claire shook her head. Not taunting. Testing. He wants to know if I'll find him. If I'll come for him the way no one came before, Claire, Vega said carefully. You're not his mother. Her eyes lifted. To him, maybe I am now. They traced recent purchases at the convenience store. Bread, jerky, matches, all small, portable survivalist staples. The clerk remembered something else, a pack of candles, a box of chalk. Chalk? Vega frowned. The implication landed heavy. Markings, rituals, messages. Claire drove out to the quarry again at dusk. The rain had cleared, leaving air sharp and cold. Vega followed, flashlight ready. Near the caretaker's shack, their beams caught new chalk marks scrawled across stone, crude drawings of stick figures, a small one beside a tall one. Over and over. Sometimes the smaller figure was crossed out. Vega muttered, That's not graffiti. That's a diary on rock. Claire's throat tightened. He's still living here. Still trapped in the loop deeper in the woods, they found remnants of a camp. A tarp strung between trees, charred fire pit, scraps of food wrappers, fresh. Claire crouched, running a hand over the damp soil. He's close. Branches snapped behind them. Both whirled, lights cutting the dark. A man stood 10 yards away. Hood down, gaunt face, pale as bone. Eyes sunken but alive with something fierce. Ethan, Claire whispered. He flinched at the name. Vega raised his hand slowly. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. Ethan's gaze darted between them. His lips parted, voice raw, as though unused. She never came, he rasped. She promised, but she never came. Claire's chest ached. Ethan, your mother, she never stopped searching. He cut her off with a harsh laugh, jagged and joyless. Lies. Albert said she forgot me. Albert said the river took me. Albert is gone, Claire said gently. You're free now. His expression hardened. Free? You think I'm free? Look at me. He spread his arms, rain-streaked and trembling. I am what Albert made. I am what the dark kept. Vega stepped forward. You don't have to keep running. But Ethan's eyes locked only on Claire. You came. Too late, but you came. Now you see. He backed into the trees. Ethan, wait, Claire called, but he vanished like smoke. They scoured the woods, but the night swallowed him. At dawn, Claire returned to her apartment, body heavy with exhaustion. She turned on the light and froze. On her wall, scrawled in chalk, were the words, Now you're kept. Her breath caught. She hadn't heard anyone enter. No lock broken, no window shattered. He'd been inside. Again. At the precinct, Vega slammed a fist against the table. We can't chase shadows anymore. He's unstable, dangerous. He broke into your home. Next time, it won't just be chalk. Claire nodded numbly, but inside, her thoughts spun. The look in Ethan's eyes last night, pain, fury, longing. He wasn't just lashing out. He was demanding recognition. She realized, with a chill that reached her bones. Ethan didn't just want to be found. He wanted her to join him. The call came just after midnight. Static crackled through the line, followed by a strained whisper. Bridge. Then the line went dead. Claire sat upright in bed, heart pounding. She knew the voice. Ethan. She grabbed her coat, holstered her weapon, and drove into the night, headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the fog. The bridge loomed ahead, its iron trusses skeletal in the moonlight. Rain slicked the asphalt, pooling in dark patches. She parked, engine idling, and stepped out. The river surged black and swollen beneath. A figure stood at the midpoint of the bridge. Thin, hood down, face pale, eyes hollow. "Ethan," she called, voice echoing. He didn't move. Only the river's roar answered. She walked slowly toward him, every step deliberate. "You wanted me here. I'm here at last," his voice carried over the wind. "I waited." Days into years, scratches on walls, promises broken. "Do you know what that does to a boy?" Claire's throat tightened. "I can imagine." "But you survived. That means something." His lips twisted in a bitter half-smile. "Survival is not life. Survival is being kept, like an animal." "You're not an animal," she said softly. "You're Ethan Delaney. You had a family. You were loved." The smile faded. His gaze sharpened. "Loved? Then why didn't she come?" Claire took a breath, the rain stinging her face. "Your mother tried. She never stopped. She just didn't find you in time." His hands clenched. Too late. Behind them, a low rumble, an engine approaching. Vega's SUV pulled up at the bridge entrance, headlights washing across steel beams. Ethan flinched, stepping onto the railing. "No!" Claire shouted, holding out a hand. "Don't!" He balanced precariously, water churning far below. Vega climbed out, weapon drawn but lowered. "We can help you, Ethan." "You don't have to do this." Ethan's eyes darted between them. His voice broke. "Albert said the river takes everything. Maybe it takes me, too." Claire's pulse thundered. Albert lied. The river doesn't take, it gives back. Tonight, it gave you back. For a heartbeat, Ethan's expression wavered, torn between despair and hope. Then a shot cracked the air. Concrete chipped inches from Ethan's feet. Everyone froze. From the shadows under the bridge, another figure emerged. Jason Kearney, one of Albert's old associates, rifle in hand. His face twisted with rage. "You shouldn't have found him," Jason spat. "He was meant to stay hidden." "Always drop the weapon," Vega barked, raising his gun. But Jason fired again, bullet ricocheting off metal. Ethan staggered on the railing, arms windmilling. Claire lunged, grabbing his wrist just as his foot slipped. The river roared beneath, ready to swallow him whole. "Hold on," she cried, straining against his weight. For an instant, she saw in his eyes the boy from the school photo, frightened, wanting to believe. Vega fired clean, precise. Jason collapsed against the bridge wall, weapon clattering to the asphalt. Claire pulled with all her strength, dragging Ethan back onto solid ground. They collapsed together, rain drenching them both. Ethan trembled, breathing ragged. "You came," he whispered. "Yes," Claire said, gripping his shoulders. "I came, and I won't leave you again." By dawn, flashing lights painted the bridge red and blue. Jason's body was taken away. Officers swarmed the scene, collecting shell casings, documenting evidence. Ethan sat wrapped in a blanket at the back of an ambulance, staring blankly at the rising sun. A medic checked his vitals, murmuring softly, but he didn't respond. Claire stood nearby, exhaustion pressing down like lead. Vega joined her, his face drawn. "He needs treatment," Vega said quietly. "Years of it. He may never—" "I know," Claire interrupted gently. "But he's alive. That's the start." Her gaze lingered on Ethan. Even broken, even haunted, he was no longer just a name on a file, a ghost in a quarry. He was here, and the bridge had given him back. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady hum of machines. Pale morning light seeped through blinds, painting faint stripes across Ethan's bed. He lay still, eyes half-lidded, gaze unfocused. Claire sat at his side, hands folded in her lap. It had been 3 weeks since the bridge. 3 weeks since she had pulled him back from the river's edge. Doctors called it severe post-traumatic stress, dissociation, long-term captivity syndrome. They spoke of years needed to untangle his mind, if untangling was possible at all. But sometimes, late at night, Ethan spoke in whispers. Day 40. Albert says I belong here. Or, the chalk runs out. What if the walls stop listening? And once, when he startled awake from a dream, trembling, you came. Too late, but you came. Vega stopped by often. He stood now at the doorway, arms crossed, watching silently. You should go home, he told Claire. You've barely slept. Claire shook her head. He needs someone here when he wakes. He needs more than that, Vega said gently. You can't carry all of it yourself. Claire looked at Ethan, his gaunt frame cocooned in hospital sheets. I know, but after everything, I can't walk away. Vega didn't argue. He knew some wounds weren't healed by medicine alone. They needed witnesses, someone to remember with them. The town buzzed with shock after the truth came out. Newspapers ran headlines. Missing boy found alive after 23 years. Caretaker's quarry reveals dark past. Bridge of secrets, cold case, cracks open. But beneath the headlines lay quieter conversations. Neighbors recalling strange noises near the quarry years ago. Teachers who wondered why the sheriff never pressed harder. People questioning how many other children Albert might have hidden before Ethan. The county promised investigations, committees, memorials. But Claire knew the deepest reckoning was not with institutions. It was with the silence that had stretched for decades. The silence that allowed Ethan's scratches on the wall to echo unanswered. One evening, after visiting hours ended, Claire walked the bridge again. Fog curled over the rails, the river murmured below. She stopped at the midpoint, the same spot where Ethan had balanced on the edge. Her hand touched the cold steel. She imagined him there, trembling between survival and surrender. She imagined Albert, whispering lies. And she imagined Ethan's mother, waiting for years with hope that never bore fruit. Claire whispered into the fog, "We've found him. He's not lost anymore." The words carried into the river's roar, unanswered. Weeks stretched into months. Ethan improved slowly, fragile but moving forward. He tolerated short conversations. He accepted food without suspicion. He even walked the hospital garden once, though he flinched at every bird's sudden cry. Claire sat with him daily, reading from his old school yearbook, showing him photographs. "This was your baseball team," she'd say, pointing at faded faces. Sometimes he looked. Sometimes he turned away. But each time, his hand lingered a little longer on the pages. One afternoon, as she prepared to leave, Ethan spoke. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Do you think I'm still Ethan?" Claire's chest tightened. She met his eyes. "Yes, you're still Ethan. You always were for the first time." He gave a faint, uncertain smile. Yet the shadows never fully left. Jason's death silenced one accomplice, but whispers suggested others may have helped Albert over the years. Police unearthed fragments, unmarked graves near abandoned lots, reports of missing children that had slipped through cracks. The quarry remained cordoned off, its cabin now a crime scene sealed with tape. Tourists began to drive by, pointing at it like a haunted relic. But Claire knew the real haunting wasn't the place. It was the boy-turned-man, sitting in a hospital room, carving tally marks into his mind long after the walls had crumbled. On the anniversary of Ethan's disappearance, a memorial was held at the church. Candles lined the steps. Families of other missing children gathered, clutching photos, whispering prayers. Claire stood in the back pew, candle flickering in her hand. She listened as names were read aloud, not only Ethan's, but dozens of others. When the service ended, she stepped outside into the cool night. Vega joined her, lighting a cigarette, though he never smoked more than a drag before letting it burn out. "Do you think he'll ever be okay?" Vega asked quietly. Claire watched the candles flicker against the dark. "I think he'll always be between worlds. Part of him will never leave that cabin, and you?" She exhaled slowly. "Part of me won't either." Later that night, Claire returned home to her apartment. The door was locked, the windows intact. Yet something tugged at her nerves as she stepped inside. On her kitchen table lay an object, a baseball card, different from the others. This one new, crisp, untouched by years. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Not Ethan. Never Ethan." Watching Claire's hand shook as she held it. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper, heavier. Was it Ethan? Someone else? Another remnant of Albert's dark legacy? The card lay cold in her palm, but the words burned. She realized the story wasn't over. Somewhere in the silence, someone was still keeping watch.